My name is Kellan Lear. I'm the chair of the county party, and we are very honored to have the two candidates seeking the Democratic nomination for the 1st Congressional District here with us tonight for a forum. So we're going to start with a few announcements, the first being the Treasurer's Report. We have a current balance of approximately $23,000, and we intend to start leasing a headquarters here soon. In fact, we got a draft of a lease today for a property downtown. We'd really like to turn that into a permanent space if we can, so if any of you are interested in becoming monthly recurring donors, we would greatly appreciate that, because that is our lifeline that helps us make budget projections for the next year as we head into this very expensive campaign season with a primary and a general election. And then we also have, speaking of money, our March fundraiser next month, obviously. It's on Saturday, March 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Doubletree by Hilton. We will, of course, start sending out information very soon. I think our first email will go out this Saturday with information on how you can RSVP and donate. The theme is celebrating the women's suffragist movement, and we have over 10 candidates coming, including Colin and Lauren, as well as Cindy Holscher and Ethan Corson, and then many others as well. So yeah, information will come out soon. Be on the lookout for that. And with that, those are all the announcements. So we will move into the candidate forum. Would Colin McRoberts and Lauren Reinhold please join me up here, and please give them a warm welcome. So here's the structure for tonight. I will ask a series of 10 questions to which each of you will have 2 minutes to respond. Kayla, sitting in front here, has a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left to respond, and a red card for when time has expired, and you will alternate answering first. And I'm just going to sit right there in front to ask you the questions. So, here you go. Okay. Colin, you're going to start us off with your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Do I need the mic? Or am I...
Yes.
I never think I do, and people keep telling me that I do, and I never believe you. This time I'll take you on faith.
All people know it.
I'm Colin McRoberts. I am a teacher. I'm a businessman. I'm a negotiator. I teach business law and negotiation at KU, that other big Kansas university, the one that does, more basketball than football. And I got into politics only a little while ago. For a long time, I cared about the world. I cared about issues, but I did not care about party politics at all. And I was a registered independent in Kansas for most of my time here. What changed for me was Roger Marshall. Not many people have done more to get me into politics and make me care about politics than Roger Marshall and Tracy Mann. Almost exactly a year ago, I went to see Roger Marshall do one of his sneaky snake town halls out in Oakley, Kansas. I went out there because I care almost more than any other issue today about, weirdly enough, vaccinations. Personal interest of mine. I really care about good science, good communication, truth and honesty, and all the things we see being degraded on a regular basis by RFK and anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists and, of course, Roger Marshall. So I went out to see what he had to say about voting to confirm Roger Marshall, see what he had to say about Doge, and I watched him run away. I watched him break when one constituent of his asked him one question too many that was just a little bit not respectful enough. And I watched him visibly sag in his chair, stand up, and walk out because he couldn't handle it. I happened to be taking video that day. If you've seen that online, it's because you saw the video I took, and some random person, I have no idea who to this day, happened to share the video from my Facebook onto whatever their feed was, and the New York Times picked it up, and CNN picked it up. And by the time I got back to Kansas, I got an interview request from people asking what the experience was like. And I had to tell them, this is what it's always like in Kansas. Our incumbent politicians are terrible at their jobs because they're used to safe elections. They're used to walks in the park. That's what I mean to take away from them. We're in a blue wave. We can take advantage of it, not just for this race, but for every race after this to make the 1st district more competitive. That's what I'm in this race to accomplish. That's what we're going to accomplish. And I thank you very much for your time today.
Hi, I'm Lauren Reinhold and live in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm really glad to be here tonight. So, Tracy Mann has represented our district in Congress since 2021. Each time he was elected by up to 70% of the vote. And Colin and I are both seeking the Democratic nomination to face him in November. It's going to be a really tough election for all Democrats this year, and like it always has been, right? Now here's the kicker. Tracy Mann's campaign currently has $2.3 million on hand. His is a campaign bought by corporate PACs and special interests, as only about a quarter of his contributions are from individuals. And I personally have not raised $2.3 million. I doubt Colin has raised $2.3 million. And either one of us will be in a merely decent shape financially for our campaign if we raise $500,000. And that's just decent. I mean, we're supposed to raise a lot more than that for a congressional campaign. $1 million, they say, is the minimum. And here's what makes it harder for me. I won't take money from corporate PACs that are working against the interests of Americans in Kansas, everyday people. There's an awful lot of them that are working against us. And also, the more that we gather momentum with these races, the more money the Republicans will pour into it. Pour into the race, pour into all the races, to run attack ads, and just continue to build up their coffers, build them up. They have money. Something they don't have that we have is people power. And this race, and all our state and federal races here in 2026, they're gonna be about people power over corporate money. And that's gonna be a lot of work. It's not gonna be easy. So whatever you think of our forum here today, please get involved in Democratic campaigns and give to Democratic candidates. If we don't flip the House and Senate and keep Democratic leadership at the gubernatorial level, Kansans will get poorer and sicker with fewer opportunities for all of us and our children. We must exert people power over corporate money. Thank you.
Thank you both for your opening statements. Lauren, we're going to answer our first topic question. The government shutdown in the fall of 2025 elevated the salience of the Affordable Care Act and the affordability of health care in general. Do you believe Congress should extend the ACA subsidies? And what is your vision for expanding access to quality health care to all Americans?
Well, absolutely, those subsidies should be extended, without a doubt. I mean, it's completely unreasonable, crazy to imagine people having to pay over $1,000 in premiums. A lot are much more. And my vision for expanding healthcare is really about some legislation from Congress that takes away power from insurance companies, takes money away from the money part of it away from insurance companies. We need to have some strong legislation, and it's not going to happen without flipping both the House and the Senate. It might have to be incremental, but it's going to have to be a major overhaul that makes Obamacare probably look easy. And we knew that was not a good process. And here's the kicker. It has to involve taxing the wealthy more, period. And we can't dance around that anymore. We can't dance around this wealth divide, but it's unbelievable that people are having to choose, healthcare versus eating versus a roof over their head. And Congress has to act, and if Congress doesn't act, it's just gonna get worse.
So the question originally was, should we extend the ACA subsidies? And I doubt you'll find any Democrat running for office anywhere in the country, from dog catcher to president over the next couple of years, who doesn't say, yes, absolutely, let's do that thing, because the giant premiums are politically disastrous and disastrous for those human beings. I want to pivot instead and talk about what we can do with this for this particular race. Because one of the things that's the biggest political issue right now in the Kansas state elections is property taxes. Not an issue that resonates at the federal level, except that one of the drivers of property tax increases has been the need for public employers to cover higher and higher and higher healthcare premiums for public employees. By tying those issues together, we can actually bring the property tax increases into the federal race and say, this is what we can do to support tax relief on the state level, taking steps to reduce premiums for all Kansans, including those public employees. That's going to take more than just ACA subsidies, though. We have to go beyond saying, let's extend the subsidies, which were intended as a stopgap measure, and say, convert this into a permanent fix, a long-term fix, a public option. I think the country has seen this step-by-step trying to fix a long-term problem with temporary solutions for a long time. We're in a place where we can now more credibly say, it is time to start talking about single-payer healthcare. It is time to take concrete steps towards a real permanent solution, and we can do that in a way that makes a fantastic difference for our political future as a party. Separately, in terms of our vision of improving healthcare long-term, there are two things I think we should be talking about much more. The first is improving access to medical devices, especially for seniors. This is the way we can do the most to capture technological advances in a way that improves quality of life. And then separately for rural voters especially, telemedicine. And again, there's nothing new about me saying that. This is something that's obvious to a lot of politicians, but it's time to invest serious money in telemedicine to make sure that if hospitals aren't able to stay open, despite our best efforts, there will be solutions available for rural Kansans, and they know who they can trust to bring them those solutions. And it's not the party that's been closing those hospitals.
Colin, you can answer this question first. The United States continues to fall lower in the rankings of student performance in math, science, and reading among industrialized nations. Education, however, is considered an issue for states and local school boards to address. What role do you think the federal government should play, if at all, in improving academic achievement?
Thank you very much. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I have an 8-year-old child in second grade in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm a teacher myself, although I teach at the university level. There's not that much difference between students. The first thing we have to do is improve teacher training. And I don't mean that teachers are inadequately trained today. I mean that it's too difficult to get that teacher training. We need to improve the schools that are producing teachers and nurses and the other professionals who do so much to improve the day-to-day quality of life of Kansans, and again, especially in those rural areas. As large farms become more agglomerated and they kind of combine together, we're losing people who work on those farms, and that reduces the population of those small towns, which takes people out of the hospitals, out of the schools, out of the diners. We lose the population, we lose the market for those teachers, and it's harder to support those schools. So the first thing we have to fix is the infrastructural problem of the schools are there, the teachers are there, because that supports the populations of those small towns. Second, I think we need to tie together those grade schools, the high schools, and the universities, because the educational mission is the same, the training is connected, and that's one of the ways we support that educational mission. And honestly, one of the primary ways we can do that is simply as politicians standing up and speaking up for the mission of education, taking pride in education, reminding the country that it was shameful to make a professional wrestling huckster the head of the American education program simply because she was willing to tear it down for the sake of politics. Reminding people that education matters is a rhetorical step, but it's a vital step. And it's one of the ways we support the research, the academic progress that's made Kansas strong and wealthy and is now being pulled away by DOGE and by funding cuts. We can tie that back together from the second grade all the way up to our graduate students.
So the federal government provides about 7% of most districts' funding. And that's in the form of, sort of extra services. Teacher training, as Colin mentioned, special education, early childhood education. Also creating some parity to make sure that districts that are underfunded because of taxation, lower tax in their counties get more funding. That 7%, that role that we have in the federal government, from the federal government, is very important. It doesn't sound like a lot. You'll probably hear Republicans make a case for it's not a lot and not important, but it's something that districts are depending on. And breaking down Department of Education and pulling back funding, this whiplash effect. We've seen it in multiple areas in 2025, and they did it in the summer, if you all recall. They pulled money back from Kansas and said, oh, you can't use that money, and then they couldn't plan for it. Gave some of it back, but not all of it. So Congress needs to stand up for what it's appropriated for. It is appropriated under the law, these funds, through the Department of Education. Through the Department of Education, not through any other, not through the Department of Labor like they've talked about. Through the Department of Education, where people are knowledgeable about how to administer these funds to the states and determine who needs it. And losing that just means the states will have to make up the difference. And then the educational issues with, students lagging behind will just get worse. So Congress needs to stand up and make sure that what they've appropriated for is used as it's intended. Okay. Yes.
We need to get a third mic apparently. All right, so.
Just have to remember to give it to you.
Let's say a voter, perhaps a Republican or a Libertarian, approaches you and argues that Democrats are hypocrites for being pro-choice when it comes to reproductive health decisions, but pro-mandate when it comes to immunizations. What do you think of this argument, and how would you respond to that voter?
That's an interesting one. Well, it's all about public health, right? It's all about keeping our communities as healthy as possible. Reproductive health is about public health, and we've seen many women die in Texas and other states with restrictions because they couldn't get the reproductive care that they needed. We're talking beyond elective abortions, talking needed abortions. Vaccines, monitoring the diseases out there that, the CDC needs to be monitoring, research, all of that. I mean, there needs to be a certain standard in our country about how we as a community stay healthy. And I'll say, there's pros and cons to all medical treatment. Vaccines are not always 100% safe, but they're usually safe, and it's about the cost-benefit analysis. It is much more, we've seen what's happened with the measles outbreak. I just heard today that Dr. Oz is now saying people should get their measles shots after all that nonsense. But yeah, we have to look at what's healthy for the whole community and not just individuals, because individuals don't always have it perfectly right. I will say one last thing about, this individualism, this notion that we just get to choose to do what we want and how we want, behave as though we're not connected in this world. This is being reinforced by the breakdown of the CDC, the NIH, and all those HHS agencies that are so important. I'm learning more and more about what they've done to break down those agencies, and it's horrifying. We're going to be paying for years to come.
So 2 issues that are especially important to me. And first, when it comes to a woman's right to choose, we can't compromise on that. I'm going to talk a lot during this campaign about the need to reach out to independents, reach out even to moderate Republicans, and that is going to entail at some point talking about common ground. We will not compromise on a woman's right to choose. Both because it's the right position, and also, guys, Vote No won in the 1st district. Vote No showed how much Kansans support that freedom. There are a lot of MAGA farmers out there who are surprised to find out that their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters actually kind of want that right over reproductive health care. And they learned it when we won that election. It is a winning issue, and we will win on it. Vaccines, a little bit different. No one ever went to jail in America for refusing a vaccine. That mandate was not a criminal law. That mandate wasn't something that people were forced to do. It was the government reminding people that vaccines are safe, vaccines are effective, and we cannot cede ground to conspiracy theories, we cannot cede ground to RFK, we cannot cede ground to the culture of irrationality that's rotted out the GOP over the years. Anti-vaccine belief used to be a bipartisan issue, something I studied way back in the day. It ceased being a bipartisan issue around 2016, when it suddenly became a party issue on the far right. We have an obligation, not just electoral, not just political, but moral and ethical, to stand up for the truth, which is that vaccines are the single greatest health innovation of the last 1,000 years. They have saved more lives, and guys, not just human lives, cattle, chickens, all kinds of the animals we rely on for our economy. Vaccines did that. Don Hoover, running in the 2nd District, fantastic candidate, fantastic Democrat, a Republican until January 6th, saw the light, stands up very eagerly and says, I'm a veterinarian. I'll tell you how important vaccines are, and you know it because you vaccinate the cattle. We stand up for what's right. We stand up for what's true, and that is both the woman has a right to choose and vaccines are safe and effective. There is no contradiction there. We show it with confidence and strength.
You can answer this question first, Colin. So from 1940 to 1980, the highest marginal income tax rate never fell below 70%, a period many economists associate with greater economic equality and a much smaller gap between worker and CEO pay. Today, the top rate is 35%, and CEOs earn roughly 300 times the salary of a typical worker. What role do you believe tax policy plays in driving economic inequality, and should marginal tax rates be reconsidered as a tool to address it?
Interesting. You are not going with the easy questions today. Although part of it is easy. Again, you're not going to find many Democrats who won't stand up and say, we need to think about and take serious steps towards taxing the wealthy in a more aggressive way, because the imbalance has gotten particularly serious. I don't think the imbalance in terms of wealth stems directly from tax inequality, though. I think that stems more from simply changes in corporate law over the last 50, 100 years. I think it stems largely from the growth of what we used to maybe call the shareholder class, and today is increasingly being called the Epstein class. I'm not sure how I feel about the rhetoric, but I do think it works, and I'm not going to walk away from it at this point. That comes largely from the inequality, not just in how tax rates are done, but also in the difference in capital gains tax and the engineering that's been done to keep the investor class particularly wealthy, and again, at the expense of workers over the years. Addressing tax inequality is one way of going about that, making sure that wealthy are paying their fair share. But separately, I think another thing we have to do to move forward on that front is strengthen labor. Because that political fight is not going to be won just in halls like this. That political fight has to be fought by many different groups all across the country. And in addition to the Democratic Party, the group that's done the most to have that fight, to support it, to articulate the values that will bring us back to that economic place, are labor unions. And by standing up for labor, by standing up for that organized political movement, we're standing up for an America in which there is an active voice that is as strong as the much better funded voice, as Lauren pointed out, of Republican politicians who have no end of big checks standing behind their message of higher taxes are the problem with everything, Democrats are the problem with everything. All we really need to fix our problems is a couple more Elon Musks, and then we'll all live on the moon and everything will be happy forever. No. Labor unions are one of the ways we solve that problem. Thank you.
So there's a bill out there right now that was, I think it was introduced by Bernie Sanders and Rashida Tlaib, the End Outrageous CEO Pay Act. And I fully support that. It creates a taxation, increased corporate taxation for those corporations that have more than 250 times their average worker pay. And that's, I mean, I think they could lower that even. It should be like 100 times. I think that's just gonna be a small piece of the puzzle though. We need an overhaul of the tax system, and we need to get back to corporate tax rates and, you know, graduated tax rates, marginal tax rates that are even more robust. Way more robust than we have now, but more like we had in the 60s and 70s. Right now, you can see, you know, commonly a billionaire end up paying only 7% in taxes, while your average worker might be paying 13% in taxes. That's unconscionable. You know, and once again, it's gonna take taking over the House, taking over the Senate, and for all Democrats to be brave enough to say this. Tax the rich. We have to tax the rich. I mean, they're hiding it in their investments. I also did a little just exercise the other day preparing for this. I asked myself, well, I asked, Gemini, and read read over the research behind it, trying to figure out what Charles Koch, he is someone who is a taxpayer, believe it or not, paid like $39 million in taxes in 2024. Under 1965's taxation, he would pay 3 times that. So we've obviously let things slip and let the rich just take over, and I mean, it's corporate welfare. We need to call it what it is, and corporate socialism.
Lauren, this question for you first. Social Security is projected to be insolvent by 2033. And if that happens, benefits will be cut by 24% across the board. How do you propose we save Social Security from insolvency?
Oh, it is very, very simple. Raise the cap. Right now, someone who earns more than, when they hit the point in a yearly income where they earn more than, I think it's $184,500 for this year, they don't pay any FICA tax. We have to raise the cap. And once again, Democrats are going to have to take over, and they're going to have to be brave about that. And they're going to have to be brave about enforcing tax rules and funding not only Social Security to make sure that Social Security can, administer the payments it's going to need to make. They're sorely understaffed, but funding the IRS so the IRS can collect taxes again. But yeah, the cap is unbelievably low, and it is just wrong, and it's so simple. When you have so many Americans living in poverty and a lot of disabled and seniors. Also, some, children get those benefits too, other dependents, widowers, widows, and there are too many people dependent on Social Security benefits living in poverty, and the notion of cutting those taxes so that we can keep the FICA tax low for the upper middle class, I guess at this point, and the rich is outrageous. So in my time at Social Security, I wrote 1,200 disability decisions, and seeing the conditions that those people had to live in, reading about their stories. Nobody wants to go on disability just for the fun of it, because you can make a lot more money working. And we need to increase benefits, not decrease them. It's unacceptable.
So I think there's a consensus among the left, especially among politicians and policy wonks, the cap should be raised. The question is, how do we persuade the upper middle class, particularly, that they should agree with us on that? Because we're going to need their votes to make that change stick in the long term. And I think we actually tie that back to education, as we talked about a second ago, in the same way that we convince couples who don't have children, or no longer have children inside a public school, that they should continue paying taxes to support the public school. It's because they still live in society, and they still live in a society that is better when their neighbors are supported by the public safety net. If we can convince the upper middle class that that tax is purchasing something, is worth something, that it goes towards that stronger and healthier society, we can take a stronger political step forwards towards a stable change. Because the problem is, if we take advantage just of this blue wave and institute a temporary change, we've seen in the last year how much can be lost when that tide turns against us. It needs to be a change that happens with that broad public support. Separately, I want to agree with something Lauren said about funding the IRS. This is something I've talked about with my students for a long time. Very few people understand how underfunded, how disabled the IRS is, because no politician ever runs successfully on giving more money to tax agents. They don't need tax agents. They need computers. They need email accounts. They need the chance to do the job. The most sophisticated piece of technology the IRS uses, the most valuable piece of technology they have, look this up online to get a chance, called a tingle table. It's a table like this, with special cubbies built into it, so they can just file the piece of paper in the right place as the tax return moves across the desk. It is 1950s technology, because that's how they're still processing tax returns. By restoring funding to the IRS, we can reduce effective tax rates in many cases because we get more juice out of that orange, and it becomes a much more stable, much fairer agency. And again, that's the rhetoric we're pushing here, the fairness, restoring integrity to the machine of government. Because without that, we're just ping-ponging around between oligarchs, and that's what we're trying to fix as Democrats.
Colin, this one's for you first. Tariffs, threats against allies, and Trump's imperial desire for Greenland and Venezuela. All of these are destroying the world order and the U.S.'s global reputation. What should Congress do to check Trump's foreign policies and regain economic and diplomatic trust with our allies?
That is the job of 50 years. And it has to start 50 years ago, to be honest. I've worked around the world, and I forget the exact number now, 24, 25 countries as a consultant, as a negotiation expert. I was hired to go work for companies and diplomatic teams around the world to improve negotiations. And I get emails and calls sometimes from my friends around the world, and it's all some version of, what the hell is going on? What's happened to you? How is this insanity not shut down immediately by Congress, by people who know the damage that's being done? And the answer is simply that not enough Americans understand the value of those relationships. We live in such a huge and wealthy and safe country, we lose track of what the rest of the world knows, which is that we are not safe. We are not okay, none of us, without neighbors we can trust. And we had that, and we're losing it. And the way we fix it first is by restoring a sense of shame to American politics, by pointing at this infantile, insane effort to drum up support for an invasion of Greenland and saying this was madness, this was unjustifiable, and restoring that sense of integrity, at least to the public rhetoric about it. More concretely, the policies we take here, we immediately, once we're in Congress, restore the tariff power to Congress instead of leaving it in the president's hands. Not just Donald Trump. No president should have this power again because of the damage it can do when it's used improperly, unwisely, and it's been used improperly and unwisely. To our benefit as Democrats in Kansas, because our voters have seen the damage it's done to our foreign markets, but it needs to come back. And the next thing, and this is something that I talk about a lot, and if I don't get a chance today, talk to me afterward. Look at my website, USAID. The damage we did to USAID, the death of the Food for Peace programs is a national shame. And we must bring accountability back to Congress, restore it, and never let the people who destroyed it take credit for rebuilding it at USDA, burning down a house, and then demanding they get credit for building a shack with a smoking match still in their hands. That's how we restore integrity back to the United States, by reminding the world we do care. We are decent people. We will not let this shame continue in our hands.
Oh, yeah. Tariffs, Venezuela, Greenland, how many? Hundreds of executive orders. We've let this Congress, our Congress, people we have elected to represent us, have let this power go completely wild. And they just have to stand up for it. They have to, and I think in addition to Congress specifically, you know, every principled congressperson out there, who many have, you know, have said over and over, Congress, this is Congress's purview. They've initiated, you know, acts about Venezuela, and they go nowhere because of their colleagues who are silent. And I think that's where they need to start calling, and the constituents, for those colleagues who are silent, like us. I mean, what have you seen Tracy Mann talk much about ICE or Greenland or any of that? No, he just says everything's great. Everything's gonna be great under Trump's, yeah. Economically, and the tariffs are gonna work. They will, just trust me. He says as little as possible, and we have to hold them to account, because not having an opinion on this is not okay. I mean, and then, you know, the ones who clearly have the wrong opinion on it, and say this is not in our purview, when constitutionally it is, declaring war, anything like that. I mean, and this is, I mean, it's gonna come down to people power, people speaking out, and also the people in Congress speaking out against their colleagues and exposing them for what they are, doing nothing, not doing their jobs. I mean, if I'm working in a workplace and someone's not doing their job, I want them to do their job. And they're letting them get away with not doing their jobs.
All right, so kind of speaking about Congress not doing their jobs, next question is for you first, Lauren. What does fidelity to the Constitution and the rule of law mean to you in practice, and how would that commitment shape your actions in Congress during moments of constitutional crisis?
Well, as a federal employee, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, to follow the Constitution. And apparently a lot of members of Congress took the same oath and aren't taking it seriously. It's like they're burying their heads in the sand about true separation of powers. And what it means to me is speaking the truth, speaking back to what Congress is supposed to be doing, which is arguably supposed to be the most powerful branch, and put the president in check, and keep fighting for it, and do more than just, we tried strongly worded letters, right? It comes down to really being, in a way, being activists. I remember Cori Bush camping out on the Capitol steps when Congress was going to lift those eviction restrictions. We're not seeing things like that anymore. And I think Congress really needs to, those who are principled in Congress, and as a congressperson, I'm not going to hide from the truth and saying what's right and fighting for it. Even though I know, truthfully, a lot of people are not doing that because they're scared. That's sort of the elephant in the room, is like, when tyranny takes over, are people safe? Are leaders safe anymore? And if you signed up for it, you've got to speak out for what's right.
I taught 2 classes today on constitutional law. Due process, equal protection, talked about the First Amendment, 4th, 5th, 6th, not so much the 8th, that doesn't do much anymore. The Constitution means a lot to me. As a trial lawyer, I went to court to defend my clients, family businesses, and other people, to defend their constitutional rights. A lot of us can talk about how much the Constitution means to us, but it doesn't mean anything if we don't do something practical about it in Congress. And the most important step that we've come up with, and this isn't just me, but it's not something that's getting nearly enough pressure from politicians on the left, is to amend Section 1983. This is a vitally important statute. It has shaped your life, whether you've heard of it or not. Originally called the Ku Klux Klan Act because it was intended to help stamp them out. In the 1800s, this act was used to give people a right to sue government officials who violated their constitutional rights through illegal searches and seizures, violating the 4th Amendment, excessive force, things like that. It has worked to a large extent to hold police departments and state troopers accountable. It has never applied to the federal government because it just wasn't intended to. At the time, it wasn't as much of a problem. It was state agents who were violating people's constitutional rights. That's not the problem today. The problem today is a federal government that has gone completely off the rails, that has lost all sense of integrity and accountability, and we have a president who chooses to allow it to face no accountability, who shuts down investigations to make sure that his agents can violate people's rights freely because that serves his political interests. A Section 1983 amendment would give people a private right of action, to be able to sue in civil court in a way that no administration could shut down, and it would provide an incentive for federal agents not to violate people's Fourth and other Amendment rights, because it would give them an independent right to recovery. That's how we start to defend the Constitution, letting people have the tools they need to defend it for themselves instead of relying on a government that we have learned in the last year will not always be there for them. That is an amendment that Congress has to pass, but it's a one-sentence amendment that would do more than anything else to restore integrity and accountability to the federal government and restore those constitutional rights that have been ignored way too often these days.
All right, our last topic before the concluding statements is immigration. Colin, you're going to go first. What would humane immigration enforcement look like to you? And how should federal immigration officers be held accountable when they abuse their authority?
Yeah, well, I'll simply say, Section 1983. What happens way too often today is that immigration officers know there will not be an investigation. They know the administration wants violence, wants chaos, wants those headlines. When Preddy was shot in the back, it was because agents understood there would never be consequences if they misbehaved. They had no worries about excessive force because they knew they were protected. We amend Section 1983 so that the family members of people who die due to excessive force can sue. Not because of money, that's not the point. And these cases aren't lottery tickets. They're very difficult to win. The point is there is an independent check then on the federal government that doesn't exist today. When people are searched illegally, when ICE violates the rule that they need judicial warrants to conduct a search, a rule they've been violating in a massive scale, this gives people a right to sue even if they've been deported, which means their rights can be protected because they have rights if they're inside the United States, whether or not they're documented aliens. The Constitution doesn't care. Separately, in terms of immigration itself, I want to return to the Immigration Compromise Act of 2024. It was not ideal. There were a lot of things I'd like to improve about it, but it was a compromise that Republicans had agreed to. It was a stable landing point and a step we can return to that is possible to return to a bipartisan compromise. This act almost entered law. It was agreed to in the last days of the Biden administration, but Donald Trump needed an issue to run on and instructed Republicans in Congress to kill it. They've seen the consequences. They've seen the blood. They've seen the results. I think there's an appetite to return to a bipartisan compromise that could work, and this is something that means a lot to me. My grandfather is a Mexican immigrant. I want to see legal immigration. I want to see people coming to this country to work, to improve it, to build families like mine, and I don't want them to do it in fear. And we can do that with a return to the compromise that added some border security in exchange for a much larger legal path to immigration. And that compromise, again, is the stable step forward we can take to long-term reform and long-term improvements.
So from 2005 to 2008, I practiced immigration law. And, you know, I think back to, it's really the same set of laws. They haven't changed now. It's just how the agencies are carrying it out. I think back to how it was then, and it often felt very unfair, but it wasn't that bad compared to what's going on. It was more humane. It was, you know, immigration law is a very complex body of laws that, you know, covers family immigration, business immigration visa classes, as well as the humanitarian aspects, addressing refugees and asylees. That was processed properly. There were enough staff. They didn't just cut off asylum applications at the border at the whim. But at the same time, even then, we had millions of undocumented people and who needed a path to citizenship. And I remember, you know, as an immigration attorney, having great interest in the immigration reform bills that were, you know, introduced then. They're probably somewhat similar to the 2024 bill. And it has been 20 years that Congress cannot, longer than 20 years really, that they've needed to do this, to fix. But humanitarian is just, I mean, humanitarian immigration means don't act in a racist way. We don't mistreat people from other countries, and we don't treat people like criminals when they're not criminals. Now that said, there are some immigrant criminals who need to be removed from the country. I've represented a couple of them. And that needs to be handled through law enforcement that is not a Gestapo. I mean, I thought ICE was kind of the nasty part of the DHS then. I mean, nothing compared to now, nothing. And I do think we need to get back to a comprehensive immigration reform bill, probably starting with the 2024 bill, and then going from there, because a lot has happened in 2 years in immigration. A lot has happened that we need to solidify humanitarian procedures that allow for asylees, refugees, and for fair treatment and removal, and speedy treatment. There's so much that could be said about immigration. I'm sorry to go over on that one. Thank you.
Go ahead and stay up there.
Okay.
Please give us your closing statement.
Yeah. So, wow. It's an overwhelming time to be running for office. It really is, because so much is happening every single day. Keeping up with the news, keeping up with the, sort of the spell they've put part of this country under. And it really, it comes down to, we have a serious wealth, disparity. Serious income disparity that's hurting Americans horribly. They've destroyed agencies. That might sound dramatic, destroyed, but they've gone in and just messed up the gears of a lot of agencies, and we're not even gonna see all those effects for years, for months, I think. But, people are gonna have to rise up. And so I'm just gonna get back to the same sort of plea I made in my opening, is get involved, get everyone you know who's willing to be involved, vote, make sure your family members vote. I think people have been afraid to talk about politics, but I don't think we can afford to not talk about them now. I really want to see more young people involved in different ways. And I don't know the solution to that. I don't know, but I want that to happen before people get hurt more.
There is a massive blue wave, not coming here. Think about Texas for a minute, the reddest, the surliest of red states. Their 9th Senate district has a very similar partisan imbalance to our 1st congressional district. We won last week. We won that election, and it wasn't because Democrats turned out. Democrats stayed home, the way they often do. Independents turned out, and independents who traditionally voted red switched because they've seen the world around them the same way we do. They have the same concerns we do. They have the same passions we do. That blue wave is here. We are riding it, and it is our chance to take advantage of it, to build and to inspire, not just in this election, but to reach out to the people around you and talk to them about the politics you have, about the things you care about, the problems you see, the solutions you want. It's a chance to reach out and build the organizations around us. This party, indivisible, 50-51, Leading Kansas, all these nonpartisan and left-leaning organizations that are doing something to reach out to Kansans and build, because every step forward we take in this election rides that blue wave, not just to this election in November, but to the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that, because every Kansan who sees a Democrat talking inspirationally this election remembers that next time. Doesn't see us as baby killers and socialists and all the slurs they throw at us, sees us as neighbors, sees us as leaders. That's you. You wouldn't be in this audience if you weren't that person who cared, if you weren't someone your neighbors look to as someone who can lead on these issues. Do that. Lead. Talk to each other. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your friends and family, especially the ones who disagree with you. Dig deep. Give to me. Give to Lauren. Give to the party. Build that party. Give to those organizations like Indivisible, like Leading Kansas, that are doing something to organize us, because this is our chance. We are building something every single day, and it's not for this year. It's for next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and that strategy will make a significant, real, lasting difference in the 1st District with your help, because we're all the same team. Thank you very much.
Let's give a round of applause.
I really want to thank both candidates and campaigns for agreeing to participate in a forum. We as Democrats in the 1st District don't usually get a contested primary, and as voters it's important that we see our choices side by side. Face to face. So thank you both again. Thank you all for coming out here. I just want to make a few more event announcements. Again, we have our fundraiser on March 28th, information coming out soon, and then also our next monthly meeting is on Tuesday, March 10th, from 6 to 7 p.m. again in the Manhattan Public Library Auditorium. And our guest speaker is Senator Cindy Holscher, who is running for governor. So that is all I have tonight. Thank you all again for coming, and have a good evening.